Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. South Korea is stepping up its response as the Middle East conflict continues to shake global energy markets. The government has raised its resource security alert for crude oil from caution to warning, citing supply disruptions and rising oil price volatility. With shipping through the Strait of Hormuz still constrained, refiners are scrambling to secure alternative crude supplies. To stabilize domestic supply, the government has introduced a strategic petroleum reserve swap system, allowing refiners to temporarily use state stockpiles while replaced cargo is secured. Now, authorities are also tightening energy demand management, including a two-day vehicle rotation system for public institutions. So how serious is this current energy security situation for South Korea, and will these measures be enough to manage the risks ahead? For more on this, we are joined in the studio by Sung-Soo Eric Kim, founder and CEO of DataCrunch Global and adjunct professor at Yonsei Graduate School of Business. Thank you for joining us, Professor Kim.
Thank you for having me tonight.
And also joining us online is Song Soo-young, professor of business and economics at Chungang University. Good to see you, Professor Song.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's start a discussion first with Professor Song. The government, like I've said, has raised the resource security alert for crude oil from caution to warning. Tell us, how serious is this current energy situation for South Korea?
Since the outbreak of the U.S.-Israel war against Iran, actually the escalation of the war has made the Strait of Hormuz effectively shut off. And that could have shown some ripple effect all around the world, particularly the East Asia, including China and South Korea and Japan, has mostly relied upon the imports from the crude oils from Middle East. As a result, the situation is cannot be worse than as anticipated. So I believe that we have prepared for this situation, and so we have operated some 9 stockpile reserve place around the world. And in March only, our government has distributed some 22.46 million barrels to stabilize the oil price. However, we have altogether 190 million barrels. So this implies that we have our 2 months buffer against some oil shortage or the increased price. So to maintain the economy to work properly and as normal as possible, but still, unless without enough replenishment for the supply the oil, our economy could be subject to some serious situation. As a result, the government decided to raise some level of concern over the oil crisis situation from warning from the caution and the concerns to the warning situation. So that is a very appropriate action and step to guard against the potential problems to come up in the future. So anyway, I believe that our government has capacity to deal with the current situation and very agile and very cautious and very careful about how to maneuver this difficult situation.
So the government really has come up with swift measures, and it seems it sees the situation as more than just a temporary situation. Now, looking at the situation back, zooming out, Professor Kim, President Trump, he set a final deadline for Iran to accept the deal, and the conflict, it appears to be entering a quite decisive phase we're seeing. How do you think the next stage of this conflict would affect the oil markets and the supply stability as well?
I think we have to first understand why Trump has conducted the operation at Venezuela, then why Trump is going war at Iran. I think we could look into what happened in 1974 when United States had an agreement with Saudi Arabia to control the oil market and also to have US dollar as the dominant currency, which we call a petrodollar agreement. Venezuela and Iran operation is conducted because U.S. is losing power against OPEC. They're losing power against controlling the oil price, and also because BRICS announced that they will accept petro yuan. So Trump has a lot of discussion to do with Xi Jinping next month. So that's the reason why Trump is conducting these operations in Venezuela and Iran prior to the discussion with Xi Jinping. So I don't think that this war is going to end without a concrete, result from Trump's side. So we can outlook that this war will sustain for some time, even if United States withdraw from this war. There's going to be continuous escalating conflicts in the Middle East, which will impact the global oil market and global economy. So we will see some, earthquakes, remaining from the Iran war, even after U.S. Withdraws from Middle East.
Mm-hmm. So it will definitely deal a big blow to the oil markets globally. Now, in fact, we're already seeing prices move higher with WTI crude climbing above $100 a barrel. Professor Song, how concerned do you think we should be about further price volatility?
At first, I do not want to make a fuss, but so today, Western Texas Intermediate crude future price has climbed the level to 115 barrels per today. But however, this is a little bit slightly lower than several years ago, 3 years ago, when the Russia and the Ukraine war occurs. The Brent crude oil future has reached $118. So, to that regard, clearly the steep increase of price matters and cause a serious problem around the world, particularly for East Asian countries. But this level of per barrel price of the oil price could be borne or by our economy. Considering, as the Professor Kim has mentioned, the 1974 issues, at that time when the OPEC has reduced the supply of the crude oil to the world, and then it has reverberated to the level of almost 2,000 percentage increase of oil price. That's why it had so much impact on the economy, and it occurs twice in 1970s. In comparison with that, today's and these days effect of the oil price has been a little bit alleviated and mitigated and less than what it used to be. Of course, the reason is the world economy and has reduced the reliance of some fossil fuels, and energy mix has been changed. Of course, our Korea has also changed and tried to adjust the energy mix and reduce the reliance of the crude oil, but it is still very essential and it's imperative for South Korean economy to import crude oils to make and produce some plastic and such as oil-related products, also for the transportation. So to that regard, it's very crucial for our economy. However, the war continues. It's totally up to the United States and Iran and Israel. But as Professor Kim pointed out clearly, that this war cannot easily be ceased. Even though United States withdraw, Israel has the incentive to continue the war, and also Iran not only they have to recover their sovereignty and to protect themselves, they continue the war until all these kind of tussles and problems has been settled and clearly. So to that regards, this war cannot stop easily. To that regard, we can say this crisis may continue more or less with some escalated, rather than even though at this escalated level, the war situation could continue. So that is going to be a burden to our economy.
Right. That's why many of us are really concerned about this prolonging situation indeed. Now, in order to deal with that, the South Korean government, it has introduced several measures, including a strategic petroleum reserve swap system. Professor Kim, how effective do you think this system could be in, stabilizing crude supply?
So I think the government is saying that our government is going to supply about 20 million oil in reserve. Because if you calculate how much we are short, 7 ships are held in Hormuz right now, which accounts for about 14 million. So in a simple, mathematics calculation, if the government, swaps 20 million, then the government is thinking that the demand will be met. I mean, the supply will be met. But the condition is for our refineries, to find an alternative source of oil, which can be United States or Kazakhstan. Like our, cabinet is visiting Kazakhstan right now, Oman and Saudi Arabia to find alternative sources. But even if refineries find alternative sources, it takes time to actually contract and ship it back to Korea. So it's a lead time issue. Government is projecting that at least with the 20 million reserve, Korea can sustain about 5 to 6 months, but we need a more rapid government support to actually close those alternative contracts and ship those alternative oil to Korea so that refineries can use it. Currently, our refineries, I think, have about 2 months of a reserve, so we still have time, but it all depends on industry-government collaboration at this stage.
Mm-hmm. Then, we've touched upon, South Korea, it has already identified alternative crude from regions like the U.S., Africa, and Australia. Professor Song, how quickly can these supplies realistically replace disrupted Middle East imports?
Actually, when you go into details, it needs some kind of adjustment of equipment when we change the import oils from Middle East to other countries, because the quality and the contents, ingredients of the crude oil could differ from according to the different areas. Therefore, it needs time, but we have, as Professor Kim has mentioned earlier, that we have a 2 months buffer. So it means that even though we have supplied some necessary crude oils to produce some refined petroleums and diesel oils and other necessary plastic products, then we need to find the replenish and some further supply to fill up some vacant stockpile or storage of our oil reserve. Otherwise, our economy will stop. So 2 months is a relatively long period, but still we need to make sure that the supply is guaranteed. So to that regards, this effort needs to be continued and pursued by the government until every current war situation in Middle East has been cleared out. Even after that, the ceasefire or truce accomplished in Middle East areas, we still need diversify the supply source, because we have depended too much on the Middle East through the Strait of Hormuz. So this revealed some kind of risk for our energy mix. So that's why we need to make continue our efforts to find alternative areas and flexible enough equipment to be prepared to refine the crude oils.
Right, that would be very important, especially in this very uncertain global environment. Now, going back to the government's efforts, Professor Kim, South Korean government also introduced this odd, even number vehicle rotation system for public institutions starting tomorrow, and also Arirang TV, we also will follow that rule. How much impact do you think could these measures realistically have on oil consumption?
So if you look at the forecasts from the Ministry of Climate on how much it will have an effect on oil consumption reduction, they're focusing about 17,000 to 68,000 barrels monthly. But our daily oil consumption itself is 2.8 million barrels. So we can say that the reduction effect might not be that significant. But I think it's very important for the government to show that this is a very crisis situation, very important crisis situation. So the government is trying to control the situation, and we are introducing precautionary measures to prevent a greater crisis. So the signaling effect, I think it's very important that the government is giving a message to the public that this is a crisis situation. So we all have to work together to navigate through this situation, because as Professor Song said, there's more risk that might come in the coming weeks and months. So it's always good to have the government, give warnings to the public.
It would definitely be helpful in raising public awareness as well. Now, at the same time, the government is also reviewing broader energy supply options, including nuclear and coal generation. Professor Song, how important do you think will maintaining a stable power supply be during this uncertain energy crisis situation?
Currently, the full operation of the nuclear power plant and renewal or rework of some coal power plant should be some temporary step to take care of some emergency situation like this. When we considered some energy mix of our South Korean economy, the supply of the total energy supply is consisted with coal and some oil and oil products and natural gas. And in that, among them, the electricity generation is usually produced by the coal, 32%, and the natural gas, 25%, and the nuclear, 7%. So oil is not much used at all, almost just 1.1% of the electricity generation. So this implies that oil is imported to produce some other oil products such as refined oil, refined petroleum, diesel, and the naphtha, and other things, plastics. So to that regard, the industry is the biggest client of the oil consumption. So transportation also has taken a huge chunk of the consumption of the oil. However, still it has a direct impact on some daily life, people's daily life. So this makes the government, our country, in the very trade-off relationship or very delicate position, narrow reach of maneuvering this current situation is, because the best way is not falling into the recession, but do not provoke some kind of some inflationary pressure over the economy. That is going to be a burden to the economy. So to that regards, our government needs to balance the approach for the oil control and oil price control. So to that regards, I would rather say the necessary government policy should be not just let the market decide the price and the oil price to go up. As a result, if the economy is going into the recession, the cost is much bigger than the benefit. To that regard, I'd rather choose rationing of the oil supply, oil distribution among the industry, but maintaining the industry capacity is very important as well.
A very important point to conclude our discussion tonight. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Song.
My pleasure.
And of course, Professor Kim, we really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.